Well, hello. It's time for another exciting episode of Pens in Use. This is the show where I talk about the fountain pens and inks I've been using throughout the week. And this week is a special Pens on the Road with a mystery guest. So let's dive into it. And I feel like I should add that I'm actually the guest. He's just a guest on my show. I'm a guest at his home. So, anyway, if videos like this interest you, where I talk about fountain pens both new and old and at all price points, I would invite you to subscribe. And since I'm in one of the large cities in the United States, what's your favorite large city? I will admit that I don't have experience with very many of them. Skirted Chicago. I've been kind of through the edge of Pittsburgh and Washington, D.C., and when I was about 3 years old, New York City, and that's about it. So my host was kind enough to let me use his safe, and he gave me his Wi-Fi password. So let's take a look at the pens. Oh! Don't tell him I did that. So, only 5 pens this week. I am on the road after all, so you're just going to have to live with it. But hopefully I have a few other interesting things. And if I put all this carefully back, then when it all falls off for him, hopefully he'll think it's something he did. Not something I did. Alright, so these are the pens and inks I've been using this week, and since I am on the road, I don't have as many inked up as usual, but you know, my usual uniform in the summer is shorts and t-shirt, so I have my Caveco Sport, which has been riding in my shorts. I have a Kaveco V101, which I did not know it, but it had fallen out of whatever I was carrying it in into my backpack, and discovered it while I was on this trip. So here we go, we have 5 pens in use. My Aurora 88, the vintage, Sanator Hoodie, and finally the Pelikan 400NN. Don't have my regular cognitive surplus notebook, but this is the one when I do, say, driving videos or my book reviews or anything where I need to take notes. This is the one I take those in right now. I'm about halfway through it. It's a Forest theme, but it is the same company. It is still cognitive surplus, so we're going to go with that. So let's see how they write. All right, so my first pen, of course, is the Caveco Sport. This is one of those pens where if you're walking around downtown Midwest big city and you're worried that it'll fall out of your pocket, you know, it'll sting, but it won't hurt. So this is a good walking around pen, and I've found I bought the clip for it, but I never used the clip. So other than it looks a little funny to me now without it, I don't buy clips for these pens anymore if I buy them. So we have our Caveco Sport. Has a fine point nib. I am told that this is a little bit older model. Portuguese YouTube star ODE has told me that. Okay, I realized I had the wrong settings, but I'm just going to go forward. Now we've got the proper settings on. Anyway, he's told me that this is an older style. I guess they used to use Bach nibs and they don't anymore, or they didn't used to and they started. I can't remember. I'm not a Caveco expert. But this is a sample of ink that he sent me. So this is Caveco Pearl Black, which turns out to be kind of a nice black, and I've been impressed. I'd kind of forgotten, this isn't a real comfortable pen for long writing sessions, but I just kind of like the line variation that this nib does. So hopefully, now that they have switched nib makers, or whatever it is they did, they still have that nice bouncy quality. And actually, I've been on the road, so I didn't see this, but I am told that the owner of the Caveco Pen Company was recently on Apple Boom's Top 3 Pens series. So if I remember, I will try to put a link to that video in the video description. So, not an oblique nib. Maybe slightly italic, but you know, you can get some line variation out of it, which is fun. I see I need to pull the camera back a little. I don't normally use this camera, so this is an experiment for me. And for you, probably. Alright, the next pen, the one I found in my backpack. So holy cow, you know, this backpack has kind of been laying on the living room floor. It's wandered around the house. It's been on a few hikes. I know this did not go with me on my last trip. So this has just been bouncing around in my backpack for weeks, and I just discovered it last night while I was rummaging my backpack for something else because I needed chapstick. And, whoa, Kaveco V101. There is a pen in my pen case at home wearing that card, so, yeah, when I get home, somebody is going to be divested of their throne. Because this one actually says, I don't know if you can read it in this lighting, but it says Kaveco V101 right there. And the nib on it, I think, oh, it does say, is an extra fine. Now this would be a vintage pen, probably from the 1960s, maybe the 1970s. But the ink that's in this pen is, I had to look it up. Luckily I have my computer with me. I just wrote P. Why did I write a P? Pelikan, sorry. I wrote down the wrong ink for a different pen, and that's what suddenly drifted through my brain. Pelikan 14001 Violet. Which I think is a very nice color of violet. I have one or two violet inks. I may have to ask my mystery guest, who the owner of the safe, what the difference is between violet and purple. See if I remember. That's not one of my notes I wrote down. But anyway, it's a very nice color, whatever it is. Actually, he says he's not so into color. He's never gone down the ink rabbit hole, so maybe he doesn't know the difference either. I don't know. My next pen, which traveled safely in a pen case, is my Aurora 88, a vintage version. This is the Nick Argenta finish, and it's my one that's not faded. Oh, and it's inked a little bit around the cap, so must be something about the pressure here didn't like. I know it was fine last night, but we had a storm here last night, so that may have caused a little inkage. So this is an Aurora 88. The ink in it, of course, is Aurora Black. My mystery guest did kind of enjoy this pen, although he discovered that the nib could be a little better adjusted. But it works just fine for my purposes. And as you can see, it's a very black. I don't think the camera picks it up, but it's definitely a blacker black than the I feel stupid saying that, than the Caveco Pearl Black. But you know, pearl, you're thinking it's going to be softer and more gentle, like a pearl is. Well, I guess texture-wise they're hard because you can't eat them. Why did I think of that? I don't know. This is the pen I reviewed last week. The pen I did the video on this week actually did not come with me on this trip. It was sitting on my table, and I'm pretty sure it's still sitting on my table many hundreds of miles away. And by the way, I am home now, so don't try to come visit any of my pens while I'm away, because you will also be visiting me. So this is Sanator Hoodie. I don't know the nib size. Oh, I do know the nib size. I lied. This is a medium. My guest was comparing this to the Parker 51. I like this ink one. That's something he did not like. He liked the more continuous flow of the Parker 51 design. But that's why we all have different tastes, and so many different pen companies can keep going. So this is another ink from ODE. So this is Caveco. I like this color. If I was buying inks right now, I think I'd be buying this one. It's a very nice purple. So we'll do some downstrokes, really show off that color. Why did I not put a nice burgundy or some kind of reddish ink in this pen? I don't know. I forget what I was doing the other day, but I really wanted a red ink and, on the road, and my host is not somebody who has a lot of ink colors, so I was just like, well, purple it is. And my last pen, one I've had for several years. This is a Pelikan, Pelikan 400 NN. Which I pointed out to somebody last week. They were asking, is Noi Noi. The ink in it is Elixir inks, which I think must be a local maker. I didn't hear back from the person who sent me the sample. River Safari. And they included several colors of this brand of ink, so I will have to... You'll be seeing them soon. It's the same person that sent me a bunch of Krishna inks. I wanted a green, and I have apparently used up all the green Krishna inks that they had sent me, so I said, well, let's see what else you sent, and they had sent these. So it's kind of an understated, more natural looking green. I was over a very stagnant part of the Mississippi River yesterday, and it was a much brighter green than that, so I don't know. And one thing I'll just add, I have a pen here that has not appeared on the channel yet, but I have a video about it. So it has this is a slightly sprung clip, so I need to figure out how to open up the top here, but I'll do that at home. Reform 4000, it'll be a review one of these days, but I've had a lot of trouble with the nib wants to go side to side, and between my host and somebody we were talking to, we figured out that the whole nib unit unscrews, which I'm not going to do now because that process lost a lot of ink. We don't need to do that on here, but the housing that's around the nib and feed is cracked, so we're looking at, this is something I'll do at home, of course, but apparently you can use a methyl ethyl glycol? I wrote it down, but it's not down here with me. And you can kind of weld it together. So I thought I'll experiment on this one because I have a few extra reform pens that I think, well, I know use basically the same nib housing, and they're not that great of a pen. So I may sacrifice, shall we say, a pen to save this much better pen. So we'll see. That'll be another experiment from them. And then I can put the repaired housing in the other pen. So anyway, those are my thoughts. So those are the pens and inks that I've been using this week. Like I said, I've been traveling, so I did bring a whole bunch of pens with me, but they've been sitting empty, so, But we got fun things coming, so I will turn now to my guest, or host, I should say. Guest on my channel, host of Where I'm Staying. Alright, so I am here with my mystery host. This is a world-famous mystery host, Mr. Pier Gustafson of the world-famous Pier Gustafson test.
Ta-da! My glasses are foggy now, but I can still see and still think and still talk. So, hello.
We're doing a East meets West here, and we're meeting in the Midwest.
We are in fact doing that. This is the house that I grew up in, and my brothers and I are going through the inherited debris field, and trying to decide what we need to keep and what we are going to be getting rid of. And it's tough because it's 60, in my case, 65 years of memories, or I don't know when I first remembered things, but I was born essentially in this house. And so we've got a lot of family stuff. We also have artwork that I did, artwork that my father did, artwork that my mother did, that we have to keep as well. And you saw one of them already, the safe behind Lasky is made of paper, and it was during my grad school days that I built that. And I was famous in the art world for about a minute and a half for that kind of work. And I no longer do it, but it's still here. Add to shopping cart $1 million. I'll give you half.
Okay.
So, now what?
Well, I guess I was just curious how you got into, because I know you sell some fountain pens. I'm just curious how you got into fountain pens in the first place. I know you're different from me, how you use them.
I did. I loved drawing. I was an artist all my life, and I loved drawing, and I was all about drawing details, and I was all about drawing lots of details, and I used primarily rapidograph technical pens, and the finer the nib, the better. And I used them through high school and into college. And it was the senior year of my college year that I was listening to All Things Considered, and it was National Handwriting Day. And clearly nothing else was happening that day, so they did this story about National Handwriting Day, which is on the birthday of John Hancock, and which I guess is appropriate. If you're going to pick someone, it would be John Hancock. And they interviewed a woman who ran a pen store in Minneapolis. And I had never been to the pen store in Minneapolis, and I thought, well, this has to change. And I went up the next weekend to see Fanny Friedman, who ran this store called the Good Service Pen Shop on Plymouth Avenue and 6th Street, or something like that. Plymouth Avenue and 6th Street, yes, in the Plymouth building. And I went in there and I asked the nice lady who was, she always would say, I don't know whether I'm coming or going, because she was quite old. And she was still around that time, and she sold me 3 pens, and the first of which was a very flexible Skyline Symphony Pen. I paid $12 for it. It had a adjustable nib, but it was missing the adjuster, which is useless anyway, in my humble opinion. But it also had, there were 2 little tiny slits incised outside of the adjuster slits. So it looked like a slotted spoon sort of thing. And of course it made the nib more flexible. And it would go from a hairline extra, extra fine to a really, really broad with just an ounce of pressure. And it was just an amazing pen, and I was hooked. I thought, why am I wasting my life with these rapidograph pens? So that changed. And every other week when I was back in Minneapolis, and then for the following year when I was in Madison, Wisconsin doing art, I would, every 3 or 4 months when I would come back here, I would stop and see Fanny. And one day I stopped to see her, and the store was closed. And it was closed the next time, and finally someone was in the store, and I knocked on the window, and I was let in, and it was her grandnephew, and she had died, and a month or 2 before, and they were selling all of the stock, and they sold the stock to a pen collector in Rochester, Minnesota, who worked at the Mayo Clinic as an administrator of some sort, and he later moved to Vermont. I would buy, he ran a mail order business, and I would buy pen parts from him to fix pens I would find at flea markets. So by the time and then they sent me an email saying, I understand, I know that you know how to fix pens. Would you like to buy the store? So my collection went from maybe 100 pens to 5,000 pens overnight. And I now own the store that I visited back then. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that definitely answers my question.
I'm sorry that it's so long. You can edit it too.
No, that's fine. I just, for me it was just simple. I had this pen catalog I got in the mail, and I'd never heard of a fountain pen before.
No.
I was about 10 years old at the time.
Okay.
Asked my parents, and they didn't really give me a good answer. And the only one in the whole catalog that I could afford as a 10-year-old was Parker Vector for about $3.99.
Oh, wow.
And so bought one when we went to Harrisburg the next time, and I've been using them ever since. And
well, I wish I had started when I was 10. I did have a pen but I didn't know how it worked. It was a black Schaefer flat top, and it had a very stiff nib, so it wasn't sexy at all, but I didn't know what the lever thing was. I didn't know how to fill it with ink. I remember taping over the lever and the slit that the lever was in with a piece of masking or electrical tape and just dipping it, which worked fine, but again it had a very know-nothing nib, so it wasn't really until I tried this flexible nib. I'd used flexible drawing pen nibs, the crow quill pens and things like that, but that didn't hit me because it was dipping all the time, and the scratchy nib, it just didn't speak to me. But once I tried this old fountain pen that I bought from Fanny for $12, I was hooked. So, and I still am.
I know for me, a lot of the pens in the catalog were either cartridge converter like the Vector, or they were like this, where they were a piston filler.
Yeah.
But I remember watching on PBS as a kid, somewhere probably in junior high school or high school, one of the episodes where Captain Peacock and his wife were arguing.
Oh, yes.
And she worked as a secretary for Mr. Rumbold for like one episode. And he was trying to spy through the keyhole in the office, see what's going on. So she stuck a fountain pen in the keyhole and did this with it.
Yeah, I see.
And I'm like, what just happened? And my parents had to explain that to me.
Oh, good. It's funny. I haven't seen that episode. I know that it's a common thing in Three Stooges and Laurel and Hardy. There's one where that happens, and but when you actually try to use it as a defensive weapon, like you're a squid running away from a predator, it doesn't really work as well as it does on the TV.
When I finally got my first lever filler, I had to try it, of course, and
it goes like this.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a letdown.
I think that they probably have stuntmen that have a turkey baster, and they just squeeze out a gallon of ink because it has to look impressive.
Yeah.
So anyway, pens. The pens I would buy at the time. I like calligraphy. My mother did some calligraphy for the Lutheran Church, but her calligraphy was Old English, sort of black hand kind of stuff, and also, she used sort of chancery script, that sort of printed with an italic slant, and I learned to do calligraphy with her, and I was very impressed by doing Gothic black hand lettering. And that was before the fountain pen came into my life, and then once it did, then I got excited about cursive and copper plate and that kind of stuff. So that's how one end of my pen use went. The other end went toward drawing. And the drawings I did initially were, or when I started with fountain pens, they were usually very, very tight, crosshatchy, just boring as all hell when I look back at them now. And it wasn't really until later that I started doing more sketching, more quick sketching. And
I'm going to dive off camera because I need to plug this in.
Oh, okay.
So I'll let you finish your story.
I'm going to continue to talk. You might have to unplug that light.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Well, while we're dealing with a electrical malfunction, we'll do this and hopefully we'll keep going. So this will lead into the world famous Pier Gustafson test, if you don't mind.
No, that's good. That's one of the things I wanted to talk about.
Okay. Well, the other way of drawing for me is to sketch, which is to draw quickly, to try to capture the feeling of the event you're witnessing, whether it be an avalanche or a thunderstorm or a cat, because the cat won't stay still very long, so you have to draw very fast. And one of the ways I draw, sometimes I draw with a continuous line where I'll never pick up the pen from the paper, and that's something my father did. He would use usually a ballpoint pen, and he would just sketch. He'd never lift his hand off the paper, and at the end of the day there'd be this beautiful drawing. That was very fuzzy because of that, but drawing fast is important, and a fountain pen has to keep up with my strokes, and the pen has to have ink ready at the nib so it doesn't railroad or skip. And when I first started watching Lasky, and at the time, I don't think you had any vintage pens, or you had only a few.
Yeah, I just dipped my toes into the vintage world.
And you liked the new ones, and I thought, well, maybe I will. I asked him, I talked to him live on the phone or on Skype or something, and we got to know each other a little bit. And I was curious. I know that how he normally writes is relatively methodically, relatively slow. In I don't know how he writes when he's not doing it on camera. He might write a little faster, maybe a little messier, but
yeah, it's definitely a lot messier.
Oh, it does. But it probably looks like it was written faster too.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I wasn't sure, and I was wondering whether the modern pens would keep up with the ink flow if they were driven quickly. And at a time, maybe 15 years ago, modern fountain pens did not do that. I think the manufacturers were more afraid of ink spilling on the expensive suit of the owner, so they had the ink flow was very stingy, and of course the points weren't as flexible as they used to be, so maybe you didn't need so much ink up at the bow anyway. But I found 20 years ago, maybe that's when it was, 20 years ago, almost any modern fountain pen, whether it be a Mont Blanc or a Pelikan or anything, they all skipped when I made a line, just a straight line, pen down, over this way, quickly, it would skip. Halfway through it would skip. So I asked you, would you be willing to do the world famous, it wasn't world famous, he made it world famous, the Pier Gustafson speed test, and I don't even think I called it that, but the speed test, to see if the modern ones skipped. And I watched him do it, and they seemed all to pass. And one of the things I did here when we actually met face to face, and Wasky has only seen people with through Skype and places like that, so this was the first time we were able to do it together face to face on a piece of paper, same humidity, same everything, in a controlled, if you can call this a controlled environment. We were in the same place at the same time, and we were able to test this out. And I tried the world famous Pier Gustafson test on one of his pens, and it failed. And it failed on your, sorry to say this, it was on your fancy new pen that you bought, that red one.
Yeah, the TWSBI Draco.
The TWSBI Draco, and it failed. I think I learned something that I wasn't sure about before. I had my inkling, but I now know for a fact that Mr. Squirrel here writes with a relatively heavy hand, and it's a relatively stable heavy hand. You do press down to see if it's flexible, and then you forget about that, and then you just write. You
Yeah.
go back to third gear. You don't bother, you take it out of fourth gear, put it back into third, and you just stay there. But you also don't spend time on first gear, or rarely second gear. You go to third gear, you write, you get to your comfort zone, and you write in the way you write, which is different than I do. So I think your speed tests, you're pressing down more than I did, because I very light on some of this speeding, and so I think that that they may not succeed with me doing that speed test, but Waskey survived. Maybe he's perfectly fine with my speed test failing, because he'll never do it that way. So you don't care.
Right. Yeah, I'm just different style, and most of my pen interest isn't really with drawing, it's more the writing part.
Yeah. Even though Waskey was drawing over the last couple of days, and your drawings are done in a way, you draw with staccato line work. Rather than drawing a single line like my father would, where the entire drawing is done, you'll make a face. You might make the circle as one line, but when you were drawing the shoulder of the muscle man, we were talking about the pen for men, so he was drawing the muscle man, and you made it look like how Charles Schultz draws pig pen, a lot of little tiny staccato lines. So you draw differently too.
Yeah.
Even when you draw differently than I do. So anyway, it's interesting to see, and that's what's important to me when I'm trying to find pens for customers, is I really pay attention to how they're holding the pen, how hard I think they're pressing down, how big they write, how small they write, and it really helps me understand how to find a pen for them if I'm selling a pen, and I can't really do that from a distance. So meeting you here has been really fun, and I've enjoyed playing with some of the pens that you brought, and there's two that I put aside here that I particularly like.
Yeah, and you saw my rating with the pens. We'll pull the camera back over here, and we'll get to see some of his writing with the pens.
Okay. Well,
in a few minutes here.
Okay.
But I know, I'll just say, when we stopped at the river, you went and sketched in the shade, and
you stupidly.
Yeah, I stayed out in the bright sunlight and humidity that I'm definitely not used to.
Yes. And
I went and walked around the river and took pictures and did video and things. So two different ways of appreciating the same space.
I went inside. I was inside while I was outside. I went under the covered exterior portico area of the Guthrie Theater, and so I was in relatively comfortable shade and able to draw on the paper, the bright white paper, without being blinded by the sun reflecting back. So it was a way that I was able to do what I like. But I came up with a couple of drawings I liked. I also, drew with the pen, and then got out a water brush to dissolve the ink to sort of make it an ink wash. And the water brush is one of these things that you sometimes have to shake to get started, and I neglected to change from the pen to the water brush before shaking. I got black drops all over my pants, and one on my fashionable shirt that my brother said cost $200. So I don't think I'll be wearing burlap for the rest of the vacation.
Probably.
So anyway, any other questions you have before I do some writing?
I don't think so. Most of the things I'd written down were just, I think we've mostly covered. We talked about how we met, and definitely what makes a good pen. I guess I'm a little curious what led you to sharing it on YouTube.
Being an artist is a relatively solitary life. You work by yourself all day long. You you talk to yourself all day long. The bad part is you listen to yourself talking to yourself, and you're influenced by what you say. And I also started looking at some YouTube video reviews and pen collector reviews and pen collector yammer. And I'm not saying everyone follows this routine, but so many people follow. They describe the factoids of a pen. They might never even show how it works. They'll say this pen was made in blah blah, and it came in 3 colors, and I have all 3, and aren't I great? That's vaguely what some of them sound like. They don't really talk about how the pen works. And I treat pens as a very different animal. They're a tool for me. They're not a collectible. I use them, and I know a lot of my customers and friends, pen collector friends in Boston, also use them. And the use was the thing that was missing on all of these things. Now you do see the quick bond frot jumping over the lazy dog by various people. You do see people talking about different inks. So I know that happens, but you don't. I was missing it when I started. Mm-hmm. And I also, there's so many weird things about why I collect pens, and what I find interesting about pens is no one else finds these things interesting, but I think they're interesting enough to put down on the interweb, because there might be one other person out there that finds the same thing interesting, and my soulmate, maybe it's you, maybe you are the soulmate, where that they understand the joy that I experience when I take the cap off of 51, the sound it makes, and the sound it makes when I post it on the back of the pen. They're completely different sounds. You have a completely different feeling, and you could read every book that's ever been written about fountain pens, and that will not be mentioned. And it won't, probably not, because it's not something you think about. You think about, it's the mustard yellow color, and they made that in 1942. And okay, fine. You can find that by yourself. But to learn about what the pen sounds like when you uncap it, you have to watch me. How's that?
That sounds good. I just wanted to appreciate, I was looking at the preview here, we kind of look like that portrait of the Bidens with the Carters right now, because we've got a short focal length on that camera there, and I'm just a little further in the background, so I kind of look like Jimmy Carter, and you look like Joe Biden right now.
Oh, well, good.
It's just kind of funny.
It's like this big, I can't see. I just see that.
Yeah, it's really a really tiny preview.
I'm a gray and white blob. I should have not worn this shirt, but it was either this or my strapless Dior number. Not my strapless Dior number. My strapless Dior number T-shirt I have. It's a gray T-shirt that says in stencil lettering, "My other outfit is a strapless Dior number," and I figured that would, even that T-shirt.
Yeah, got to keep it friendly in case one of my students ever runs into this.
But whatever. You're wearing your squirrel T-shirt.
That's right.
I can wear, so white it is. Any other questions that involve us having to show our faces?
I don't think so. So I'll just switch here. Okay. So we're back, and we're going to see what Mr. Pier Gustafson can do with some of my pens.
The famous Pier Gustafson. You have the one that doesn't stay.
Well, that's the one that has ink in it.
That's the one that has ink in it. Okay. He has 2 of these, and I fell in love with this pen. It's an Aurora 88. Is that what you said?
Yep.
And I loved it because it was sort of like the love child of a 51 and a Waterman Taperite pen, but it was raised with only steroids or something. It got really beefy.
Raised in Italy.
In Italy, yes. And it has the version here on. Wasky didn't notice it because he doesn't post a pen, but this cap doesn't stay on, and it's the shape of this blind cap that isn't tapered enough to make it stick. And I think our friend Friedrich thought it might have been a replacement, one of these blind caps. But your other blind cap looks like it's made of hard rubber.
Yeah, because it's very faded.
Very faded, and this one isn't. So maybe this is a replacement. And but what was really nice, and I post my pens 99.9% of the time, but I really liked. There was something really fun. In my brain, I think I'm using a 51, yet it's fatter, and it's sort of confusing to me and fun at the same time. And it has a little bit of flex, not like a 51, but like a Waterman Stately. So this was I think this is the of the ones you had. This is a favorite because of its basic blackness and the chrome-ish color cap, or the silver argenta, or whatever you called it. Is that what we called it?
This one's Nick Argenta.
Nick Argenta. Nick Argenta sounds like the name of a private eye.
Yeah.
Nick Argenta, private eye. And then you have the bongo music because he's a cool dude, cool bongo.
Cool 50s bongo music to go with the 50s pen.
And he has a 50s car, and he solves 50s crime, which has to do with narcotics and marijuana, or whatever the term was. Anyway, this was fun. But the Caveco Sport, and this is a vintage one too, you said, right?
Well, not vintage, but it's a little older. There's a newer style nib.
Okay.
ODE is the big expert on those.
But this one was, I sort of fell in love with this one too, and everything about it, I'll be gentle.
Okay.
Everything about it is wrong. It's just, there's something, but it's like everything about a Jeep is wrong. If you approach a Jeep after leaving a Duesenberg, or a Austin Healey sports car, and you walk over the lot to the Jeep, you're just saying this isn't right. This is just, why is it so ugly? And there's something that's very ugly about this, but it's also like a Jeep, which is it looks like it was meant for a function. And it's not trying to be anything other than a stick with ink in it. And that's what this pen made me think of. It was just a pen with a stick with ink in it, and it really was neat. And it has its beauty, its design is enhanced, I guess, by its fluted cap. Now, if I was at the drawing table at the Caveco family coming up with this design, I'd probably say, well, I want to have the barrel fluted too, wouldn't I? But then you'd have to line up the thing with the thing, and that wouldn't work. You'd press down and it would crack or do something else, so you can't do that. So what if I want this to be smooth? Well, it would roll off the desk or whatever. So
yeah, because they don't actually come with the clip.
They don't. So there's all sorts of reasons why this pen is as ugly as it is. I'm glad you're smiling and not weeping because I'm making fun of this pen.
I know I've got an ugly son there. He got his mother's genes.
He's got his, yes, it's not nearly as. We were talking about these pens as being our children earlier today. So, well, not all children can be as happy, as handsome, and as bright as we were to our parents, right, Rasky? So there is something about this pen that it's all about business. It's completely built for that reason, and of course, it's not going to be as pretty as the lovely pen over there that was made by the Duesenberg company. So they all come with this thing, or this is?
Yeah, that's a pretty typical Caveco thing. The older ones like this were a lot smaller.
Okay.
but it's still the same.
So it's their signature logo along with this thing here. But I've heard so many people talk about these Caveco Sports like they were the best thing that ever happened, and I thought, well, I get to try one for the first. So this was my first Caveco Sport.
All right.
And you did not disappoint me in that. It really was fun. The other pens you have I tried, and I like some of them. Oops, this one. See, this one I want to pull off, and it doesn't pull off. This one I don't even know what kind of. This is another
Kaveco
Caveco.
V101.
Okay. My pen's knowledge stopped at around 1952, so I don't know my modern stuff very much.
Well, here you've wandered into the 60s.
Okay. But this one was real. This was like the love child of a 45 and a I don't know what, like a Waterman CF or something. But it's beefier. It's really sturdy. Has a really neat nib. Normally this little step down right here that happens on most modern pens is not too dramatic that it bothers me. It also is far enough back that it doesn't. It bothers me when my fingertips bump into it, and I'm often moving the pen up and down like this as I'm drawing or even doing calligraphy or writing. Sometimes I'll move it back to, if I'm trying to draw something and I'm adding details in this area, if my hand is like this, well, I can't see half the thing I'm drawing. So I hold the pen back here, and if I have to go over this big bump, it's like a speed bump, and you have to slow down, and I have to, move my hand back, and but this isn't a noticeable bump like that, so this works well. The only flaw that I have with this pen, my complaint, is I keep wanting to pull the cap off rather than unscrew it, and if it was the only pen I had, I'd know not to do that. But this is really pretty. This one, what was this one? Does it pull? It does pull. Oh yes, I remember this one. This is the one that I felt there was something about this thing, that the see-through part, that was disturbing to me. And it looked like someone had taken the buzzsaw and cut it in half and put this bit in. It's like the cow that they would have at the state fair that had the glass-sided stomach.
Okay.
And the live cow, by the way, that had some sort of plexiglass stomach so you could see it chewing its cud or whatever it does. And that's what some of these things look like to me if they're not integrated in a more graceful way. I like the one that, I think it's on one of these pens, that has the vertical slits.
Oh yeah, this one.
Yeah. Yeah, this is done better. I mean, it looks like, this was part of the original design, where this looks like it was, put in between. I think the part that I now see what the problem I see with it is, I'm looking at this pen, and I have to draw this out here. So here's the feet, the shell, here's the ring, here's the barrel, and this part is solid and this part is solid, and my eye sees it being red all the way to this very edge. The clear part, because it's clear and it's made of clear plastic, there's a little bit of plastic on each end that the ink is in here, but there's this little area of white, clear. So it looks like it's thinner. It doesn't look like it's flush. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I get that.
So take a look at it now, and maybe I'll ruin it for you forever. But again, it's something that...
Yeah, I can see what you mean.
That it just looks like it's not the same diameter.
To touch it, it feels the same as the red plastic.
Yeah, but
the ring sticks out a little more. But.
So again, it's just these little things. It's like a fish bone in your throat, or a little pebble in your shoe, or something like that. It's a little tiny thing that that I can't get my brain wrapped around. But luckily, when I hold the pen, I'm covering up the offensive area. So, boy, I'm dissing your pens left and right here. But I'm doing it gently, right?
Yep. Not all my kids can be winners.
No, they're all winners. They're all
in their own way.
In their own way, they're all winners. If that means they come in last, that's...
You tried really hard.
No, you came in last.
Yep.
Only one person could come in, and you won. You won that part of the contest. So, any other questions you have about...
I don't think so. I know you brought down a few
I brought
pens.
down some pens, and I was going to show you sort of the Pier Gustafson speed test here. And of course, let's find out. It's going to skip now because my hands have been sitting all over this. I'm using a sketchbook that my father had, and I had a drawing to show you, but I'll find it. Oh, I just knocked this completely out of the way.
That's what editing is for.
Well, that's okay. You can leave that there. So the reason I changed the page was that oils of my hand, as we were touching that page all over the place, will put oils onto the paper, and that will react as a resist to the water soluble ink. So it won't happen here. Now, if I put my finger print right there. No. Oh well. That's supposed to skip. It didn't. But I draw like this, so I can draw an entire drawing without picking the pen up off the page. It's going to be a sloppy looking drawing, but that's what I do. So.
Yeah. And that's the Waterman tape right.
This is the Waterman taper right. Yeah, that does that. So this has a little tiny bit of flex, but I don't know. I like them. Normally, if I'm drawing, I might take a Skyline like this, or a Waterman that has a fully flexible nib. And usually, if I'm sketching, I'll make sure that it has a very rounded end, so that if I accidentally go this way or the wrong way while applying some pressure, I'm not going to snag the paper or break the nib. I would never. That's why I will have pens that I specifically have in a box that says calligraphers, because they have very sharp points, and they only really go in one direction with pressure. Pens that I have that are in the box that say Sketchers are pens like this that have a rubbery nib, and they can go backwards. And they're also good for lefties and people that write with funny angles and stuff like that. So. How's that? Any last question?
I'm a little curious what that green pen is, because you haven't shown me that one.
Well, here it is.
Oh, I recognize that gold dot on it.
It's a Wall Eversharp Brazilian bronze, or Brazilian green, they called it. It's bronze, metallic bronze plastic in it as well. And it has a nice, flexible, relatively broad nib, and it fits nicely in this short, stubby, bulldoggy kind of a pen in my mind. So this fits, and I use this for sketching a lot. And sometimes I'll hold it like this. It's sort of neat to have. It's like when you're using a piece of pastel or chalk in your hand. You control the way it moves around on the page a little bit differently than if it was a long, skinny pencil. So sometimes, even though I wouldn't think of holding a pen like this when I'm drawing, sometimes I'm doing it right now. It's kind of interesting. I don't know if I do it again, but I did it then. So normally I post a pen, though, and this, it's okay. This happens, it comes into contact with this fleshy part of my, whatever that's called, and sometimes it bothers me, but this one isn't bothering me so much. As you can see, this is a beautiful drawing of, I call it Death in the Dardanelles. It sounds like a name of Agatha Christie
Yes.
novel, Death in the Dardanelles by Pier Gustafson. Sign it. Okay, $1 million. Add to shopping cart. There. Oh, slash it. 500 grand. Let's just make it a special. Use the WASCI code to get the discount. So, any other questions?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, it's been fun just to actually talk to a real live pen person.
A real live one, yep.
They exist, not just on a computer screen.
Yeah, they're not just ones and twos. Very good. Well, thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for watching.